Good to see y'all. Let's stand together, sing a little bit tonight. Come thou fount of every blessing, to my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. And teach me some melodious sonnet, sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mountain fixed upon it, the mount of thy redeeming love. Here I raise mine Ebenezer, hither by thy help I come, and I hope by thy good pleasure safely to arrive at home. 'Cause Jesus sought me when a stranger, wandering from the fold of God, he to rescue me from danger, interposed his precious blood. Let's sing this last verse together. Oh, to grace, how great a debtor daily I'm constrained to be. Let thy grace, Lord, like a fetter, bind my wandering heart to thee. I'm prone to wander, Lord, I feel it, prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, Lord, take and seal it for thy courts above. Here's my heart, Lord, take and seal it for thy courts above. I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You had led me through the fire in darkest night. You are close like no other. I've known you as a father, I've known you as a friend, and I have lived in the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. 'Cause 'cause your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. 'Cause your goodness is running after, it's running after me. And all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Father, we praise you for your goodness, that you lead us and you shepherd us and you take care of us, you guard and protect your people. You empower us to live in a way that we couldn't live apart from you. And our desire tonight as we come to this place is to grow in our faith, to grow in our love for your word as the gift that it is. And we pray that we would treasure it as we study this together. And we thank you for all that you do in us every time that we gather, and how beautiful and wonderful it is, the work that you do when your people gather together. So we pray that you would give us wisdom, give us eyes to see the truth of your word tonight. Help us apply it to our life in a way that's real and in a way that leads us to love people like you love them, and to take the gospel to the world as you've called us to. I pray that you would be among us from beginning to end tonight, and we pray that you'd be glorified. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. You can be seated.
All right. Good evening. How are we tonight? Fabulous. Okay, good. Just checking. Glad y'all are here. I don't think I have any announcements to make tonight. Melissa is usually my plenty's happening. I just don't know if there's anything in particular I'm supposed to focus your attention on. Melissa's usually my backup, but she and Greg are out tonight, so apologies. I can't think there's anything. Anyway, so that's good. Then we have extra time. Do you have an announcement? No. Uh-huh. Be Strong, Stay Young is something we're starting on Mondays and Fridays in the FLC at 11 o'clock. And what is that? Okay. Something to keep us from getting too old. Okay. Healthy? Keep us healthy. Vibrant. Okay. Is it like exercise or what is it? Cool. Exercise, healthy living. Oh, cool. So some physical therapy with weights, she said. Okay. Be strong, stay young. Is that what it's called? Neat. Okay. Well, good. I will hope that goes well. What is there an age? Is there an age minimum? Age limit? Okay. So just to be active and build up some strength. Very neat. Okay. Well, that is a good announcement then. Mondays and Fridays at 11 in the FLC. I like that. Well, good. Okay. Well, let's get into our study. We got plenty of time then to cover tonight. Who knows? I know we paused last week to focus on Lent and Ash Wednesday. We had an Ash Wednesday service. But before that, we had just started a new study where in the Bible? Excellent. Ruth. And we're going to do some recap tonight to kind of refresh us on where we've been, and then just see how far we get. And the cool thing about our Wednesday night gatherings is we do roughly have a time limit because we want to make sure we have room for prayer at the end. But whatever we don't finish tonight, we'll just pick up next week until we're done. So really, really good. I've enjoyed reading through and studying through Ruth, and there's more here than ever I had known before. So let's recap. If you remember the very, very first week, we didn't get into the book itself too much. We touched on it some, but we gave some background, historical context to help us understand what was going on. So when we came to the story itself, it would stand out more and it'd be meaningful, and we'd recognize what it was trying to tell us. And so we said some of the basic background information was we don't necessarily know who wrote it, but that's okay. It doesn't take away from the content or the meaning. We don't know a specific date when Ruth, the story of Ruth, was written in terms of like a date on the calendar, but we do know what era, what time period in the life of God's people it came from. Do you remember what it was? The Judges. And why did we say that was significant? So they didn't have a king. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. These are the cycle that we see, the themes that we see throughout the book of Judges. And is that a good thing? It was a disastrous thing. The folks were in a really broken cycle of being rebellious against God and then dealing with the consequences of that. So in the midst of that, with that as the background, we have Ruth's story. And we said she then stands out in contrast individually as a person from her background, if you will, because she was an outsider. She was not of God's people. She was from Moab. But also because she herself was a person of outstanding and upstanding character and faithfulness and loyalty and all these good things that stands in, just direct contrast to a lot of the characters of God's own people that we'd seen. And also, we said as a book, as a piece of literature, she's a bit of, the story of Ruth is a transition piece, if you will, from the time of the Judges moving into the time of the kings to come and David and so on. But we said it's not just like a filler that just has a happy ending. It does have a happy ending, and it does get us between eras, but we recognize ultimately that God is up to something here. And it's no accident that Ruth exists, that Ruth comes to the forefront, and that whoever sat down, inspired, empowered by the Spirit of God to write this story, it's no accident that all this came together. And we see this as a background theme throughout the entire story of Ruth. We see a lot of foreground elements, and the language we've been using as we're reading and studying Ruth is as a drama. And so we're reading it like a play, if you will. It comes in 4 acts. And so each chapter, for our purposes, is going to be a different act with different scenes within the act. And so we're dealing with the characters on the stage. Ruth, Naomi, Boaz shows up tonight. We're working with that, but then also the bigger picture, the wider context, the true story, and the author of the story, we see what God is up to and how these coincidences just keep happening. That will show up tonight in chapter 2. Just so happened, so-and-so shows up, so-and-so did this. And we recognize, even though he doesn't show up directly until the very end of the story, God, his name is all over the place, but we can recognize through the eyes of faith, his fingerprints are everywhere. And that's another reason why this story is so significant and profound, because we came out of the time of Judges where God seemed to be absent, not because he was missing, but because the people had turned from him. And then we move into Ruth, who had no business knowing God because she was outside of the covenant people of God, and yet somehow she gets brought right into the heart of the story of God himself and what he's doing through his people. And she, more than his own people, catches what he's about and lives her life accordingly. And so we see her story is here on purpose, and not just because she ultimately, eventually leads to King David, but in her own right, God was up to something incredible. So Chapter 1, chapter 1 in Ruth. There are 3 scenes, and just for highlight purposes, so we can focus on chapter 2 tonight. Scene 1 was the backdrop. Elimelech is the man that we meet. As the curtain opens and the play begins, we meet Elimelech, and he has a wife named Naomi and then 2 sons whose names we struggle to pronounce in English, and so we just call them the sons. And they're leaving Israel to be sojourners, to be refugees in a place called Moab. And why do you remember? Why was that significant? So there was a physical agricultural famine which was devastating, and they were on hard times, and so they had to leave, taking a risk of leaving everything they had ever known, and beyond just family and connections and history like that, we said leaving the promised land as an Israelite was not something you did lightly. That was at the core of their identity of God's people, and so if they were leaving, they were taking a huge risk, and there was a lot of grief that went with that, leaving everything that they had known and who they were in the hopes of somehow surviving. And the text doesn't tell us there, but this is in kind of the backdrop. We said the famine wasn't just an agricultural issue of they had a lack of rain and therefore a lack of harvest, a lack of food, a lack of resources. That's just the setting, surface level. We said the bigger picture, especially coming out of the era of the judges, was a spiritual famine. The folks didn't know how to follow God, and they got into a tight spot, and they didn't know what to do about it. And so there's no judgment explicitly at the beginning of the story, but we see a man leaving his homeland, taking his family away from the promised land, and not necessarily turning to God to solve his problems, but taking matters into his own hands, probably out of desperation, hoping it would somehow work out somewhere else. And so we're just kind of keeping that in the back of our minds. They're gone. The point is they left. They go to Moab. How does it go? Not great, right? I mean, they survived. They continued. But their short stay, they wanted to be sojourners. We're just passing through. We're just trying to get back on our feet, and then we'll move back home. It tells us that just kept getting extended, and then they're staying indefinitely. The sons grow up. They're of age. They find wives, which generally is not a bad thing. That's what young men are supposed to do, start families. Problem is, they're not Israelite wives. They're from Moab. Again, not the people of God. There's a rocky history with those from Moab. The text doesn't, make any judgments on that. It's just giving you that background. But then it just starts, falling off a cliff. Elimelech dies. The sons last 10 more years, and then they die. And by the time we get to, I think it's verse 5, Naomi is not even named anymore. It says of the woman. She has nothing. We said that's significant because her name is going to show up here at the end of chapter 1. But that's telling us, again, this is a story. This is a drama. This is not just a history report. This happened and this happened and this happened. The author of this, everything's loaded with meaning. And so we're not trying to read too much into it. It's there. It's loaded with meaning. And so by the end of verse 5, this woman, Naomi, has been stripped of everything that she once knew, everything that formed her identity, her people, her homeland, her religion, her customs, her family, her faith in God himself. She's nothing. She is just a ghost of who she used to be. But she's got these daughter-in-laws, and that moves us into scene 2 of Act 1, the second part of chapter 1. And she tells her daughter-in-laws, Ruth and Orpah, I have nothing for you. I appreciate you, bearing it with me, but I'm going to go back home. I've heard that my God has visited my people. He's taking care of them. I'm going to just go fall on their mercy and see how that goes. You have no obligation to go with me. They're like, no, we want to. And that spoke to their character and their connection to Naomi. But she says, no, sincerely, there's nothing for you if you stick with me. I'm going to an uncertain future, probably a death. I don't want to put that over your head. I pray that God blesses you. You've been good and faithful to me. Be released. Go find other husbands and make new homes. You can have a life. You're still young. I have nothing for me. And then she also throws in these lines, my God is mad at me. My God has done this to me. And so she's wrestling not just with the grief of losing her family and everything, but also the guilt of, did I do this to myself? Is God punishing me? And Orpah, no fault, no judgment, says, okay, weeps, hugs, kisses her, and releases her. And she goes on, and we never hear from her again. But Ruth, we said, was different, and she clings to Naomi. And what does she say to her? Wherever you go, I'm going. This is my paraphrase. Wherever you stay, I'm staying. But it's even more than that. I'm not just sticking with you because I have no other options. I'm sticking with you on purpose to the point that even your God will be my God. I am willing to forsake everything I've known and my homeland and my connections and my potential options to be faithful to you. We don't know what the future holds, but I do know we're going to be in it together. And Naomi says just like, okay, I don't have any energy to fight you. I can't make you go home. Let's go. And let's pick up at the end of chapter 1. We touched on it last time, but we didn't really get to get too much into it, and then we'll move into chapter 2. So can I have someone read for us the return? Chapter 1, verses 19 through 22. Okay, thank you. There's 3 things here, at the least, that we want to touch on that are significant for us. The first one, and we're going to come back to this. We're going to start here, and then we're going to actually return to this theme. So she goes back home. She has nothing, no options. She's a widow. She's childless at this point. The only hope that she might possibly could have is she goes back home amongst her own people and then maybe can find a little bit of grace. Again, not looking promising, but that's her only slim chance that she can maybe find a family member to take care of her. But as a widow, at her age, and as a woman in that society in that day and age, she had no options, no prospects, really. But she knew at the very least, these are my people, and this is my God. Let me just go die where I'm from, kind of is the outlook. She is not just grieving, heavily depressed, and carrying the weight of, did I do this to myself? So she goes back home, and Ruth's tagging along with her. And when she shows up, they don't really recognize her. I mean, they do, but it's been over 10 years since she's been gone. Life changes, we know that, but life has been hard on her. And I'm not trying to be tacky about her appearance, but she shows up, and they could tell she's had hard living, right? It has not gone well. She has not aged well, is what we say. That she's showing outward signs of her inward condition. This is a broken woman. And so they ask, is this Naomi? And they're saying that not to be nasty, but this is not the woman we knew that left. The one who came back is not the one that we knew that left. And she acknowledges it, and she says, no, that's what you used to call me, because that's who I used to be. I'm not that woman anymore. And she says, my name is Mara, which means bitter. My name used to mean pleasant. Now my name means bitter. And what she's saying there isn't I've taken on a new persona, I've reinvented myself, but I have a word for who I am now. My life has become so sour on the outside that it has worked its way in and it has soured me. I am bitter because life has been so bitter. This is who I am. No pretenses. She's not dressing it up. It is what it is. This is a broken, desperate, depressed woman, and they recognize it, and she calls it out. But what's key for us, and key for Naomi / Mara, even though she doesn't see it yet, is who she thinks is really behind it all. Who does she point to? God. She's not blaming him in the sense that he's being mean to her, but she recognizes his hand. And at this stage, it's not a comforting fact, but she recognizes and points to his sovereignty. I left full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. That's verse 21. So why call me Naomi, who I used to be, someone who is pleasant and happy and full of life and options and family and faith, when the Lord has testified against me and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me? So she's wrestling with, coming to terms with, again, a lot of guilt and shame. We left. We didn't turn to God. We left everything we knew with our life with him. We tried it out there. It didn't work. And now I come back because I have nothing else. But I recognize God's been doing all of this. Stepping back from the story, we see this is going somewhere. In the story, she can't see anything beyond just her current situation. But the fact, we touched on this last time, the fact that she's back speaks volumes if he really is the one that's in charge, right? So she came back just broken. I've come back to die in my homeland, essentially. But we can recognize the author is leaving breadcrumbs for us, clues that, yes, the Almighty is at work. And yes, he is doing things in your life. And it may not be, Naomi, just to punish you. Maybe he's going to redeem a broken, dead-end situation. The author does not explore or tease out any of the details if she and Elimelech were wrong to have left. But moving forward, what are we going to watch God do? The best part is she's made the best first step she can make, and that's back towards God, as he's been drawing her back, even if she didn't see it yet. So actually, throughout chapter 1, I circled it in my Bible. It kind of shows up differently in our English translations, but it's based on the same Hebrew word. The word for return shows up 12 times in this limited passage. Return, return, turn back, came back, return, return. That's a clue to us that this is a key and prominent theme, that something more is going on here than just travel, okay? So yes, physically, she has come back. She has traveled back to her homeland, but the deeper theme is this woman who lost everything. It had been taken from her, but then lost everything as she let it go, her faith, her identity, her trust in God. She's not just coming back physically to her homeland. He's going to be bringing her back to herself, her identity, her faith in him. So it's setting the stage for us, but we get to the end of chapter 1, and we're kind of left wondering, what on earth could happen next? And the curtain closes, we go to commercial break. But now we're back. So, Act 2, beginning of chapter 2. So let's read. The first scene we're going to read, if I could have one of you read out loud, is chapter 2, verses 1 through 7. Perfect. Okay, we'll stop right there. So this is scene 1 of Act 2. And new character alert. We've met someone here named Boaz. And just from this little scene, we're going to learn more. I'm just going to give us some character development. But just from this opening scene of Act 2, what do we learn about Boaz? Why might he, let me ask it this way, why might he be an intriguing figure? Okay. So Boaz, where did I put my marker? Here we go. Is intriguing for at least 2 details. He said a kinsman, so a relative in our modern speech. And you said, and he's wealthy. So my translation in verse 1 kind of dresses it up a little more and says he was a worthy man. But a more straightforward translation is he was a well-to-do man. He was prominent. He was wealthy. He was a man of good standing, good status in the community. And so he was doing all right, is what we might say. So he's a relative, and he's doing all right. And it just throws it out there in verse 1, and then it moves back into the rest of the story. And we need to remember the situation that Naomi and Ruth were in as desperate. Not just difficult, but absolutely desperate. They are poor, desperately poor, and across every level of their life. So financially, they have nothing. Relationally, they don't know if they have anything. They know, Naomi kind of has some family, but there's no connections yet that are being made. And so spiritually, they feel very empty. And so they feel impoverished across many, many different ways. But before they can even address the bigger, deeper things about, where is our life going? Do we have a future? Can I figure out what I'm doing? Some of these more existential questions. The most pressing issue is, do we have food to eat? We need to eat. If we can't eat, none of these other questions are going to matter, right? And so what are we going to do? And Ruth hatches a plan, right? And she has this plan to help support Naomi and provide for their basic needs. And fortunately, in God's land, there was a law, a custom in place that helped provide for people in tough times, right? And so that's what they're relying on. This is based on Leviticus 19 and Deuteronomy 24. God had specifically instructed his people to leave extra behind when you're harvesting your fields. If you drop some, don't go back for it. Or actually, drop some on purpose to help those who are needy, who don't have, so they're not just entirely on their own. So how do we define the needy? The widowed, the orphaned, the outsider, the foreigner, right? So folks who don't have options or connections won't be entirely cut off and cast out. That's God's intentions for his people, but we know reality is not everyone follows God's intentions, but at least there was some shred of opportunity there, and Ruth was going to take advantage of it, make the most of it. And so even though gleaning is not much better than begging, it's meaningful work. It gives her something to do. It gives her some agency. I can work hard, and it gives her a little dignity. I'm not just accepting, pity and handouts. I'm earning it. I'm doing the best I can. Again, not an ideal situation. It's going to be hard and hot and backbreaking work, and it's not guaranteed that she's going to get much, but it's something. We've got to start somewhere, and so she does. Let me ask this question, though. Why do you think it was Ruth, the outsider, who did not know God or his ways or the ways of the land or the laws of the land? Why do you think it was her who took the initiative here? Do what? Naomi had given up. She's back, but again, in her mind, I'm kind of back to die. Ruth, I told you to leave. If you stick with me, it's not going to go well for you. Well, here we are. And my heart goes out to Naomi. We've all had periods of time, probably not to this degree, but grief. When you are grieving, when you are depressed, you are not thinking clearly. You can't think of the future. You just see right here, right now, and everything is awful. So she was not in a position to take care of Ruth because she couldn't even take care of herself. And so we see that, again, just the characters on the stage, we see some of that dynamic there. We see Ruth's character shining forth, but also bigger picture, storyline-wise, we see, again, there's something really special about this young woman and her faithfulness and her loyalty that's going to be hopefully rewarded. Let's ask this follow-up question. So she's got a good plan in place. We see that she's not averse to hard work, but she recognizes, and everyone else does, and we'll read more about this in a second, even though it's a good plan in theory, it might give something which is better than nothing. Why might this have been dangerous for Ruth to go do? So she's an outsider, young single woman, from a foreign country. So in terms of like pecking order in society, in terms of rights, privileges, power, status, safety, she's at the very, very bottom, and it's not looking good, and she's just going to throw herself out there and just see how it goes. So she's taking a risk. So it's not just that she's hardworking and going to do what it takes to take care of herself and her mother-in-law. This is a huge risk to her that she's stepping out to deal with. So she's fully aware of this, and the language shows up in that she says, my translation, I hope I can find someone who will show me favor, which is saying, I hope I can find a spot to land that's not going to kill me, right? I'm looking for favor. Hopefully, and she doesn't know to call on God yet, hopefully I can find something. And so we're watching, and we know the story, but if we're just reading this for the first time, we see that she's going out with a little bit of optimism, but a whole lot of wariness that this may not go well for her. She's hoping against hope that something might happen. And so Ruth carries out her plan, but look at verse 3. Sue, will you read verse 3 again? There's a key phrase in this verse I think is really important. What key phrase do you think might be found here in verse 3? Just so happened. I'm going out, Naomi, I hope I can find something. I hope I can find a landowner that's nice enough that they'll let me, and the guys who work the fields aren't creeps. I hope maybe somewhere out there I can get something good going. Verse 3 says, and it just so happens, what a coincidence, that she not only finds a field, it happens to be this Boaz guy that we introduced to you just a couple of verses ago, who is a relative and very wealthy. We're planting seeds. There may be something more here. And so if we're just tracking, again, if we've never read this story, we're just watching it unfold. This is curious. This Boaz figure may be very important, very key. And so on a surface level, we can at least be happy. Things are looking up because we just heard that this guy's a pretty good guy. And he's got the room and he has the opportunity to be generous and kind. And so maybe, hopefully, this is going to be turning around. But bigger picture, even if we're not coming at this as people who've already read it or people who are open to what God is up to, at the very least, we can see something bigger is at play here, right? There's more to this story that's coming. Now, for Boaz, he's involved in two ways in his position, both as an opportunity and an obligation. So as the owner of the field that Ruth just so happens to be at, he has the opportunity to be a good guy, like truly, and not just nice, but he has the opportunity to be compassionate, to be kind, to be generous. In the Old Testament laws that I quoted earlier, Leviticus 19, Deuteronomy 24, God said there's blessing for you when you take care of those who are in hard times. So not just God will be happy, but it will go well for you. I will bless you as you seek to bless others. And so he has an opportunity to receive God's blessing. Don't know what that looks like. That's not necessarily like a name it and claim it, I'm going to be wealthy. He already was, but he sees an opportunity to do the right thing, to do a good thing. So he has that. But then also the deeper level is, as a relative, there's an obligation on him. We don't know the exact details, but we're going to see moving forward him wrestling with, what is my role here? Once he finds out more and finds out, I got a connection here beyond an opportunity to be kind, I have the obligation to be helpful. What does this look like for me? And so he's going to be wrestling with this and trying to figure out what his role is. But for us, as just watchers of this drama unfolding, the plot thickens and we get excited. There's something really going on here. We're about to get to that. We're going to get to that. Yeah, so before he gets there, we're seeing the background. Oh, this is where we're sewing some things together. This is going to start overlapping, right? But then verse 4 comes. Look at the beginning of verse 4, if you will. And this is kind of stilted language. None of us talk about behold now. But the word behold, what is that indicating? Were they expecting Boaz to show up? Or did Boaz is here. Surprise. We weren't planning for. What a coincidence that Ruth shows up at this guy's field, and behold, here he comes. What are the chances that this guy of all people would show up on this day? Who could have thunk that this would happen? So I'm overselling it, but that's in the text. The language is pointing that direction. Oh, what a coincidence. Oh, what a coincidence. Maybe there's more going on here, and we see it. So Boaz shows up to check on his workers, and then describe to me his interaction with his workers here, this little mini scene within the scene. How does he talk with them? What do they talk about? So in one sense, we could pass that off as that's just a common, Israelite greeting. Lord be with you. Oh, yes, may the Lord bless you. Or we could also say, there might be more to this guy. Again, he's a relative. We know he's wealthy. He has an opportunity before him. An obligation is coming he's going to learn about. But he shows up to check on his workers, and at the very least, the laziest reading, he's at least conversational with his workers. It's not adversarial. He's not crushing them. They don't hate him. There's a good relationship here. They seem to respect him, because then they slide into conversation, and he says, oh, who is this young lady here? She's new. I don't know her, and we don't know his motivation yet, but the worker has the freedom and the trust to share. Oh, yeah, well, this is Ruth, and she's with Naomi, and she's from Moab. And then he starts describing, and she's a really hard worker. She's been working her tail off all day long. She only took one little tiny break. And so Boaz's gears are spinning, and our gears are spinning too, curious to know more about this lady. And so looking at how he describes Ruth, again, we know her, but Boaz is just learning. What do they highlight? This is verse 6 and 7. So she's young. What else? So she's a foreigner. Okay, what else? Do what? Connections. So she's with Naomi, so that places her a little bit, gives her a little bit more of identity. What else do they point out? She's been working hard all day, so she's got a great work ethic. What else? So it wasn't a poor, pitiful me. She was not aggressive. She was, again, an outsider, but polite and proper, working through the right channels to approach, to see if there's an opportunity there. But then also in just desperate need. Small town, he would have known Naomi's situation and Ruth and how desperate it was. So now he has a context for who this girl is, but he has even more than that. He has her character. She's hardworking, she's faithful, she's loyal. Even as an outsider, this stands out to anyone. The workers notice there's something different about this young lady. And so we're intrigued. Question?
And at this whole time, right at this point, I get back to thinking there wasn't a good relationship between the Israelites and
Moab. Right. They had a rocky history at best.
so for him to greet her or whatever,
So that's notable that they speak of her in positive terms when it could have very easily gone a different direction. It could have been a slur to say where she was from, but it's not in this case. It just adds context to who she is. Absolutely. And then we hit a commercial break here. So the characters are kind of getting more fully developed. Ruth is just looking better and better and better by the moment. Boaz has showed up, carrying all the weight and the drama that comes with him and his position and his character. And they haven't met yet, but it's, you know how TV shows introduce characters separately, and they kind of just start building them closer and closer to each other until they finally meet? Well, that's what's coming. So let's keep reading. Scene 2, verses 8 through 16, if someone will read that for us. There we go. Okay, you can stop right there. Perfect, thank you. So this is scene 2, and they finally meet. So we've been building up to it. We know the moment's coming. And it's an interesting situation. Let's try to, it's really easy when we're just reading it straightforward like this. It can feel very flat and very stilted. But again, we're trying to read it as a drama without overreading it, but trying to fill it out as humans and thinking about as far as removed from our current situation as this is, they're human beings, and so we can get a feel for the dynamics of the scene, if you will. So Boaz shows up, and Ruth is there. Let's not forget, they're not equals here in any way, right? She has nothing, and everyone knows it. And she has nothing to fall back on, and everyone knows it. She is incredibly vulnerable here. And he's not just anyone that shows up. This is his field. So he's powerful. He's wealthy. He could do whatever he want in this moment, even if it was unseemly, and probably get away with it, right? Everything was stacked in his favor. But from the beginning, how does he, as the person in charge, with the person with power, the person with everything going for him, speaking to a woman who has like nothing, how does he set the tone for the rest of the conversation? What does he open with? In a term of endearment, right? He's older than her. We recognize that. We don't use that language. We don't call people who aren't our daughter, but that's a kind term. He's putting her at ease. He's being intentionally, clearly caring here. And then where does he go from here? What do we learn about Boaz from this short conversation that he has with her? He starts just laying out stuff for her, but it's telling for us. So what does he tell her? Absolutely, he's a man of character. And how does he show it? What does he put in place for her own good? Mm-hmm. So there are layers here that we're going to work through real quick, and then we'll save the rest for next time. So this woman who has nothing, who has no hopes, who is just maybe going to eke out an existence at best, meets this guy who has all the power, who has everything, doesn't know what's going to happen. We see these coincidences keep lining up, so we recognize something good is hopefully going to happen. But then he takes her, a pure outsider, and he, step by step, brings her in. Literally and figuratively. You are on the outside with no hopes. I'm going to bring you into the very middle of our people. And so let me list for us the things that he promises, that he sets up, and then what it means. Verse 8, he says, don't go anywhere else. He's not telling her what to do. He said, you're safe here. This is stability. You've come to the right place. You're going to have everything you need here. Don't risk it anywhere else. I don't want to read into it, but he probably is like, it may not go well for you anywhere else, but it will here. So there's safety and stability. He leads with that term of endearment to put her at ease and says, you're safe here. Stay here as long as you want, as long as you need. He opens with that. And then he says, I'm going to tie you not just to opportunity. I'm going to let you have some stuff. I'm going to give you some anchor points with human beings, relationships, friendships, my women, my workers, my females who are your age, who are similar, stick with them. They'll take care of you. They'll watch out for you. You won't be out on your own, so you're being included, but also protected now. You're not just isolated, an individual doing the best you can by yourself. Now you're one of us. And so you fall under our protection and our connection. So there's inclusion, there's safety there. That's verses 8 and 9. On top of that, I've told my male workers to leave you alone. And we can fill in the blanks however we want to with that. They're not going to mess with you. You're young, you're single, they know the story, it's a small town, they're young men, whatever. You don't have to worry about that. Again, that's care, that's protection, that's wisdom too. That's verse 9. Then beyond that, I see you have needs. So he's ticking off the needs that she has as a human being. So inclusion, safety, protection, opportunity to work is part of it. But then he says, if you're thirsty, you can have our stuff freely. Come, when you're thirsty, drink the water. You don't have to worry that it's not yours. I'm telling you, it's yours. That's provision, that's support. That's verse 9. And then verse 11, he compliments and encourages her for what? Her good character that he's heard about. Still, at this point, we fill in the gaps because we know the story. She's young and she's beautiful is what we tell ourselves. That hadn't come up yet, other than that she's young. He doesn't mention you pretty young thing, or you're beautiful, or anything like that. He says, I've heard about you, that you're kind, that you're loyal, that you're hard work. He just praises her character, her incredible character and her faithfulness. Then verse 12, he goes even further. So he's meeting needs, he's providing stability and protection, he's encouraging her, supporting her. Then he pronounces verse 12, a key and a powerful blessing over her. Whose name does he invoke? The Lord God. You've come to the right place. It's no accident that you are here. The Lord knows what he's doing. May the Lord bless you. This is key because it's not her God yet, but she said she's open to it. It's Naomi's God. I'll be open to whatever that God might do for me. Boaz, not knowing any of what Naomi had said back then in chapter 1, says, may my God bless you and take care of you. May he shelter you under his wings. And so he's showing us, again, more about his character, that this isn't just a good guy who's nice. This is a godly man, a man of character who's providing, who's taking care, who's sheltering her. Ultimately, though, because out of his relationship with God is what's leading him to do these things, which is profoundly encouraging and hopeful for her. Then it keeps going. Verse 14, come eat with us. It's mealtime. You didn't prepare for it. You had no right being here. But I'm telling you now, you have a right to be here. Come, eat your fill. And she does. And then she has leftovers. He said, you can take that home with you. So every possible need that this woman had, he is meeting. He's providing to show care, to show concern, to show protection. And she showed up that day hoping maybe to gather a little bit to take home and squeak by for another day. And then she leaves that day with more than she could have bargained for and more than enough that she and Naomi would need, not just for today or tomorrow. Some resources, as I was studying, trying to figure out kind of the units of measurement back then, several weeks worth that she had gleaned. Because he tells his guys, hey, don't just let her get the scraps, intentionally leave her some extra scraps. And so she's gathering more than she needs. So Boaz really shows up good here, just over the top, good quality man. But Ruth, in the midst of it, how does she respond? And we'll end with this and we'll move into prayer time. What does this passage tell us about her and her character? Yeah, verses 10 and 13, what stands out? She's humble. She's grateful. She shows reverence to him. I mean, she literally bows before him and just says, I don't know how or why you would have noticed me or that you would treat me in such a way. So that shows that she's aware and she acknowledges his kindness. He didn't have to do these things, but she's grateful and aware that she did. So we'll stop here and we'll pick up more next time. It's apparent by the end of this scene, not just some potential here with this guy. There's a lot here with this guy. This guy is absolutely an outstanding figure. And now we're hoping and rooting, if we're watching this show or this play, we're hoping and rooting that this guy sticks around, and he seems to be the guy that we're all hoping he is. And we're hoping she notices, beyond the fact that he's just really kind and godly, maybe there's more there, right? It's moving that direction, but we don't see anything yet. Because Ruth, let's think about it. If we can, try to put ourselves in her position. When she showed up that day, truly, sincerely, what was she looking for? Food. That's it. Basic necessities. I'm not looking for a social life. I'm not looking to get married or any of that other stuff is not even on her radar. If I don't work today, we're going hungry and we'll die. That's all she knew. She showed up to get food, and what she found that day was a really kind guy who went over and beyond to take care of her, and not just for this day, but to create a place for her to belong. That gives her a little bit of peace and comfort, and she'll go back home, and we'll see this next time in her interactions with Naomi. And as she's recounting the story to Naomi, remember, Naomi's in this funk, and she's in the tunnel of depression. Everything's broken. Everything's awful. God hates me. We'll see what happens. We're just going to die here. As Ruth come home and just starts sharing, I met this guy, Boaz, and he was so kind to me. And look at all the stuff I brought home. We have more than enough to eat. And Naomi's just sitting there listening and looking at all the food. And she wait, you met who? Boaz. And the light bulb goes off. And her eyes are opened, not just to this moment. Ruth has no context for any of these things. She's just sharing what happened. But something changes in Mara, Miss Bitter, where she recognizes God is on the move. I don't know what he's doing, but he's up to something. And we're going to pause